Now let's continue on these other issues from the Russia-Ukraine crisis. 10 bodies and flight recorders have been recovered from the scene of a jet crash presumed to have killed Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. This is according to the Russian government. Investigators say molecular genetic tests are now being carried out. The plane crashed near Moscow on Wednesday, prompting speculation that a bomb or a missile was the cause. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman says claims indicating that the Kremlin gave an order to kill Mister Prigozhin were a complete lie. It told the BBC earlier that Prigozhin, once a Putin loyalist, led an aborted armed revolt by his mercenary fighters in June. For more on the Wagner boss's plane crash, update on the war between Russia and Ukraine, and international affairs analyst Yuria Fancheli joins me online virtually from the Brazilian capital, Sao Paulo. Thank you so much for joining me, Yuria.
Thank you, Ibrahim. It's nice to be here.
Right, so there has been so much hullabaloo as to who was responsible for the death of Prigozhin. Ukraine, on the Independence Day, a day before their independence, had Prigozhin's plane crashed, right there on his way to St. Petersburg in Russia. But then Putin also blamed Ukraine. Ukraine blamed Putin, and the United States President Joe Biden said that hardly anything happens on Russian soil without Putin knowing about it. What's your reading of the noise around the death of Prigozhin?
Well, Ibrahim, I don't see a lot of people really concerned on finding out what happened, because it's even interesting for the Ukrainian government to raise doubts concerning Prigozhin's death, because if we look throughout Russian history, it's been something very common that Russian oligarchs, supporters of the Russian government, that are often portrayed as traitors. They end up dying in a mysterious way. So people were asking, when the mutiny happened a few months ago, how long is it going to take until something happens to Prigozhin? It's interesting for Putin that this happened, and also interesting that it's not completely sorted out how it happened, because the doubt about it must it also serves as an example for other oligarchs not to betray his government.
Then Yevgeny Prigozhin seemed to have made lots and lots of enemies for his own self, even though he's got some alignments with different countries. His hand was felt in Libya. It was used by Khalifa Haftar. Assad also used him in Syria, the Syria conflict, which is still, ongoing. Burkina Faso, too, he was also a mercenary there, and talking about Mali, Sudan, Afghanistan, etc. So he has made for himself a lot of, foes. Do you feel that this is much of a setback for whoever has an alignment or had an alignment with the Wagner group?
That's very difficult to answer. Much of the Wagner activities outside of Ukraine, they should continue to happen as normal. Someone should take Prigozhin's place. Putin, he signed a decree saying that the mercenaries that fight, the paramilitaries that fight for Wagner, they have to swear an oath to the Russian government. But it's very difficult to answer right now. We had today Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko saying that he warned the Wagner leaders that something like this could happen at any moment. But we have to wait and find out how these activities, especially those outside Ukraine, will carry on.
Well, so as they say that Putin never forgives whenever you offend him. We've seen what the Russian giants had done, in different places. He actually made Yevgeny Prigozhin, and he could have seen his end looking at different allegations. Prigozhin also was accused, alleged of mutiny when the Russian soldiers asked him to, be on there, to be subordinate to them. But then, what President Putin was, speaking on the global stage, Prigozhin also made something which irked the Russian president. What do you see, in these activities that before the death or that led to the death of Prigozhin himself?
Well, when the mutiny, when it began, it only lasted. People thought that Russia was about to go to civil war, but it only lasted for a few hours. But that was enough to make Putin look very weak. And the fact that Putin said that all those responsible for the mutiny were going to be punished, something that didn't happen afterwards, because Putin ended up he gave the Wagner mercenaries three options. They would either go and sign for the Russian military. The second option was they would go back home. And the third one is that they were going to go to Belarus. But unlike all of those fighters, Prigozhin had free pass to go between Belarus and Russia constantly. And that was not something that could continue to happen, because Putin, he cannot look weak within Russia or outside Russia. So we see now, even the day that the plane crashed, we saw Putin saying that there was a very, very good day for Russia. Yes, it looks like he's enjoying the moment.
Interesting. Ukraine just marked their Independence Day, and we saw how Russia thought they could have overrun Ukraine, and the war has been going on for 2 years, which the global causing much global effect after the pandemic. And do you see what impacts do you think the death of Prigozhin might have on the Russian-Ukraine struggle between the bellicose countries?
I know that that's a natural question. People should ask, what happens now? But we have to think that the mercenaries were already outside Ukraine. Most of them, they went to Belarus, to those camping sites that were provided by Alexander Lukashenko. So I don't actually think that anything will change in Ukraine. Things might change in other areas where the Wagner group acts, as in Africa, for example, in Syria, for example. But in Ukraine, I don't think that anything will happen. We may say that his death might be used as an example, so other people, other oligarchs keep on supporting Putin, or that people don't try to do anything similar as the Wagner group tried to do a few months ago.
Right. Jura, before I let you go, we've seen the death of different leaders of various mercenary groups and some other groups. For instance, we've talked about the Saddam Hussein, we've talked about Osama bin Laden, we've talked about different leaders. We know about ISWAP and ISIS. Whenever their leader or their leaders die, they usually have a successor. Do you think this might signal the end of a Wagner group, which they said we should not personalize it around Prigozhin, that it's an organized group? Do you see it as the end of the Wagner group, or they might even come back stronger?
That's very difficult to answer, because I don't know how much we can compare those terrorist organizations that gather people around an idea or an ideal of a worldview that they have with a group of paramilitaries, because those are professional fighters. They are hired, they are there fighting and putting their lives into risk, not because they believe in something, but because they make money with that. So that's very difficult to answer. It all depends, I think, on the structure, the internal structure of the Wagner group and how it is organized.
Well, we'll continue to monitor the events as they unfold. Yura Fancelli, an international affairs analyst, thank you so much joining us from Brazilian capital, Sao Paulo. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.